here. All right, 10 people is enough to tell me if the audio works. It's always an adventure on a YouTube Live. Steve! Perfect. I would expect you to be first. Did anyone go through a hurricane? Are you never going to invite me out? Probably not. Good. All right, good. Audio works. We're going to do this the good old-fashioned way, not in a van, clearly in a townhouse that survived a hurricane, although it was really uneventful. It was no big deal. Good. All right, we are rocking and rolling. We're going to do a live read, and we're going to do it the old-fashioned way with headband and a Jinja Ninja sweatshirt, just like out on the road. I'm not putting on makeup this morning. That is not going to happen. All right, we'll get a couple more people, and then we'll get to work, because I do have some updates about the book and the next van, which I'm currently shopping for. I have not bought. When was that? Well, Bob. I bought Bob, but Bob was used. I started shopping again on what is it, RV Finder, and like a Class B is about $200,000 now, and half of them are lithium ion. Totally, like there's no generator, and I have a lot of questions about all that. Good. Ann's here. Is the townhouse noisy? All right. So when I sold the War Wagon and then I moved into an apartment because I just had to have somewhere to live. And that was a nightmare because the people next to me, the police were there all the time, which at first I didn't mind because I'm friends with all the police here. So it was like I got to see my friends every night. But like I don't want to see them at 3 o'clock in the morning with my neighbors putting a hole through the drywall. So then I bought this townhouse, and there's like not much in here, clearly, because I don't own anything and I don't like stuff. After living in a van, I will tell you that. After you live in a van conversion or an RV for a period of time, you become very wary of getting stuff. But I did get somewhere to sit, and like there's some other tchotchkes over there that I've stolen out of abandoned buildings, but in general. But yeah, so the problem with this is that there's people on both sides of me. And I don't know why I didn't see that as being an issue, because it's an issue. But I have a pond back here, and so we just went through Hurricane Ian, which for North Carolina was completely uneventful. It was just a rainstorm. And when was that? Friday? I was in court on the internet. So we had court on Zoom because of a real estate issue that was very silly, but had court. And I didn't even notice that there was a storm outside. Now, obviously, Florida got pummeled, but the only thing that happened here was that the retention pond in the back came up really high, and that was a little nerve-wracking, but I couldn't do anything about it because I was in court, so I couldn't leave my chair. This retention pond is funny. When I closed on this townhome, and I'm looking at it's called the HUD, or the closing disclosure, and where it has all the things you're getting robbed for, right? All the fees, everything on there. And as I'm reading it, it says $3,000 lot premium. And I look at the builder and I said, what the hell is a lot premium? Like, it's a townhouse. I don't have a lot. I have like a postage stamp that you put this building on. And he said, oh, well, you have waterfront property. I was like, motherfucker, that is a retention pond. I don't have enough crayons to draw that out for you. Anyway, I spent $3,000 extra just to have that retention pond. Anyway, watching from Asheville, Beverly and Asheville. Beverly, I have, as someone who is a big supporter of law enforcement, I have been looking at what's going on in Asheville, and God, I don't know what y'all are doing up there. It looks scary. Asheville is beautiful. Anyway, all right, I think we have enough people to rock and roll on what we're going to do today. So the book, Van Life, the book, we're going to do the title today, why I'm calling it what I am. Because at one point I put a video out there and I said, what do you think we should call it? And I got some good ideas, but I got the ideas that I would expect for a van book. And while the book is about living in a van, certainly. It's about a whole lot more than that. And I didn't want to lose that by having the name be something like Roman with Roman or Adventures of a Mean Ass Redhead in a Van, something like I would buy that. I would absolutely buy that. Anyway, and I'll try to keep a look on the comments over here. Okay, regardless. So I finished the whole thing. I started last October. I thought it would take me no time at all because I lived that story. I know it very well, can repeat it in an instant. I had no idea that writing a book was so much work. So I started last October, and I'll say it is a huge commitment of any time I had free time, which now I have a lot more free time because the housing market has been drilled into the ground because we have a federal government committed to drilling everything into the ground. But anytime I got free time, just sitting down and writing the book and writing the book and writing the book. And then I was putting everything up on Patreon to proofread and whatnot. I've since gotten rid of my Patreon account. I just didn't think I was adding anything to their lives. So there was no point in them paying anything. So I finished the whole thing and it was enormous. It was 76 chapters. But think of the amount of time that covered. I mean, it starts with the day that I lost my job, or I knew that I was losing my job. And then it ends back in Wilmington. And so that was 2 years, right? And a lot in between. So the project itself was a beast to write. I finished in June, and then you have to go find an agent. Well, I sent it to a bunch of agents, and that bombed. And I think for a lot of different reasons. I've already talked about some of this. But so then we talked about it on here, and I said, all right, well, I'm just going to self-publish. I'll just self-publish. So I went on reedsy.com, and there you can find editors who will package it up for you or tell you what's wrong with it so that you can then go self-publish the book. The problem with Reedsy is that it's sort of like the Tinder for writers because people can put up their profile, but you have no idea how good of an editor they are. And a lot of them, the books they've worked on, you've never heard of. So you can read their reviews and that's fine. And I found a couple people that I thought would be all right. But I really just didn't. I mean, I'm giving the story of like the biggest moments of my life into someone's hands, and it's thousands and thousands of dollars. Like some of the quotes were $6,000 to do what's called a developmental edit, which is they structurally look at the book, not proofreading, not grammar, not taking out the many times that I put the F word in there, which I did pare down, just the structure. So it's a huge investment, and I just didn't know what I was going to get back. Anyway, let me check over 76 chapters. Yes, Kathy, 76 chapters, and they were all important. So I found a woman whose company is in Raleigh, which is just up the street from Wilmington, North Carolina. And she was the acquisitions editor at HarperCollins. So an acquisitions editor is who, when you submit to a publisher, is like the first gatekeeper. And now she owns her own company. And I just felt like that was a much better fit. I want the person who kicked people out to be reading my book so that I know what's wrong with it. I mean, nothing's wrong with it, but obviously something must be wrong with it because it's not getting an agent. Interestingly enough, of all the people who I've talked to who have emailed me off of these videos who know someone who's been published, the universal story is that even if you get to a big publisher, they don't do anything. I thought that when you got an agent and your book published, that you got an email that said, Casey, please be ready in your finest headband and sweatshirt to be outside the car, the limo, the private jet is going to pick you up for the book tour that we've organized. False. That's not how that works. They don't do that anymore. Not unless you're already famous and like more famous than a former TV reporter. So I thought, well, what the hell am I going to pay them for if I have to do all the work anyway? So I'm not. So we'll just sell it here and online and anywhere else and do it ourselves. So the great news is that I did find an editor. The next challenge was I sent her the 76 chapters and she sent it right back to me. And she said, you have to cut this in half. And I said, I cannot cut that in half. It took me that many months to write. That's like asking me to trim down the Bible. It's all important. It has to be in there. I can't possibly cut it down. And she said, she said, a marketable book is about 80,000 words and you are double. She's like, "We're this is part of your problem. There's just too much in there." So I spent the past month going back through all the chapters and trying to take out a lot of it. So this is the first thing that I was curious to get feedback on, is that she recommended taking the more didactic parts of the book, the like nuts and bolts about living in a van. She recommended separating those out and making those a separate, like smaller ebook, like the practical tips, how to build, where to find resources, all that. She said, make that a separate, like small pamphlet book on the side for people who actually might do this, but she said take the story and keep that separate. So that was the first change that we made. Maybe it's you've missed my more. I'm trying to keep up with these. Hold on, give me a second. It can be my birthday present in November. It will not be done by November. I promise you it will not be done by November. Did I have the urge to stand on the beach during the hurricane? Yes. Anytime we have a storm, or frankly, anytime that I hear sirens, I'm like, where are we going? Where are we going? I gotta be out there. And I do miss that part. And I would go out there in a second and scream and yell at people and throw my microphone at their car like I did during Hurricane Florence. Anyway, so I chopped it down to 99,000 words, and I can do no more. I can do no more. So right now, the editor has it. She has 1 month to go through it and tell me the structural changes that need to be made. And then from there, it either has to go, so that's several $1,000s. And then after that, it has to go through copy editing, which is like proofreading, things like that. So all in, just so you know, if you self-publish a book, and I don't mean like you just write it on a Word document and throw it on Amazon, you're 10,000 deep before you've sold anything. And that's not with like the graphic artist for the cover and the formatting. I mean, it's a huge project. But at this point, I've invested a year in it, so I'm not going to stop now. I just need people to start buying and selling houses again. That's the only problem. At 7% interest. Thank you, federal government. Anyway, okay. Hi, Cindy. So here's what I thought we would do today. I have not, let me say this first. This video will not live on the internet, and you'll understand why once I start reading. Um, how can I unpack this? So I'm going to go through the chapter, and we can do more than one. I'd say maximum of 3. These are shorter chapters that I was going to go through. But I wanted to do why I was calling the book what I'm calling it. Ooh, that does not need to be happening. I wanted to go through the chapter that essentially named the book and why, because thank you so much, Inspirational Nomad. Why it's called what it's called. And I am open to suggestions on that, but I do think that this explains why. The reason that I am going to edit this video, this live feed down, and that you will not be able to hear the actual read, a couple reasons. One, I'm not trying to give this whole thing away for free. I just told you it takes $10,000 just to get it to print self-publishing. So like no on the free stuff. 2, it's very sensitive subject material. So I will say, if you were listening to this right now, if you have any issues with hearing about mental health problems, like now would be a good time to leave. This does not get too nitty gritty, but the whole reason that I did what I did with the van was not because life was great and me and my soy boy man bun boyfriend were just gonna like go live in a van or see how. I mean, it was awful. It was a really, really dark time. And that is actually what got everything going. And that was a large part of the reason why I wanted to write the book, because I think van life is just, there's just there's a lot of frivolous content there, but the people you actually meet on the road have had some serious things happen to them in their lives. Like there was always a reason that somebody actually ended up in a van or an RV. And you don't really get that on YouTube. And I think that's doing a disservice to the real culture of people who live out on the road full time. And I also wanted to include this part of the book and why it named the book, because it's been a major issue in my life for a very long time. But so in the fall, right around when I started writing the book, my father committed suicide. And then shortly after that, a coworker committed suicide. And then shortly after that, a friend of mine committed suicide. And so it's been a dark year. And I think it's been a dark 2 years for a lot of people. And part of that topic, suicide, is involved in the book and precipitated the whole van life adventure happening. And none of that ever ended up on YouTube, or I don't think that anyone ever knew that watching my videos. And so I'm going to read that part, and it's part of how it got named what it's named, but I'm not going to leave it up here because yes, I don't want to give away the book for free, but also I've noticed that like the people I work with, my buyers and sellers, they somehow always find my YouTube channels, which is fine, but it surprises me because I don't actually look for other people's that I work with. I don't look for their YouTube or social media, but they usually find it, and I don't know that necessarily I want this like up on the internet for everyone to see. If they read it, fine, but they paid to read it, and that's on, excuse me, that's on them. Okay. Do we want to get started? We'll go through that part. I'll go the first chapter, which is the darkest, and then I will. We can keep going until like a certain point, which I think is good for the end. Thank you, Mike. All right. Yes, I appreciate your condolences. For my dad, it happened right around Thanksgiving. Yeah. And I found out about it. He did it in a very public way, and it was like on the news and it was awful. Anyway, let's just focus on the book. All right. So I'll start here, and you're going to hear what the book is called, and I do want some input about that. Okay, so chapter 5. So the beginning of the book, the very beginning is when I actually like lose my job, and then a lot transpires in between them, but chapter 5, okay? Ready to rock and roll? Let's rock and roll. There's a marked difference between saying, I just want to crawl into a hole and die, and actually plotting to do it. Over the summer of 2018, I crossed into the latter and did a flawless job making sure that absolutely no one knew it. I believe success has 3 parts. 1, having someone to love. 2, having someone who loves you. And 3, having someone to look forward to, having something to look forward to. Numbers 1 and 2 can be tricky. People are difficult. It's why we have dogs. Number 3 is steadfast. The anticipation of what's ahead can truly keep the human spirit alive. My number 3 was stalled on empty. I wasn't looking for a shoulder to cry on. I was looking for a way to stop another day from dawning. I didn't really want to die. I just didn't want tomorrow to happen because tomorrow might be worse. We all have a reason to get out of bed in the morning. Maybe it's your children, your spouse, your business, or a cause that you care very deeply about. Whatever it is, it's the coal in your furnace. It's your why. My stories, my news stories, were my why. They were my reason for being. My life only had worth if I was giving a voice to those without one and shining a light where no one was looking. It was my art. Hundreds and hundreds of small video clips organized like a mosaic over a 60-minute timeline. I knew each second of that intimately. I had shot it, edited it, married it to a location tied to a very specific note of music. Hitting play could take people into a world they'd never seen, and I would bring them there. That created my oxygen. Now it was gone, and no one lives very long without oxygen. My entire identity and relevancy was cross-stitched to that job, my news job. There was no line where Casey Roman, news lady stopped and where Casey Roman started. And I didn't want there to be one. I didn't even know what just Casey was, and I didn't want to. She didn't sound nearly important enough. At some point, we've all lost our identity in something or someone outside ourselves. We made that our higher power. If it wasn't a job, a relationship, or a label, or maybe just a social standing that we enjoy. They give us our imaginary sense of gravity, ballast in our search for the meaning of our lives. In the big picture, my financial situation was not dire, but losing my purpose and identity was. My well was dry, there was no rain in the forecast, and I could not think of a single way to stop the leak in the bucket. I was assigned that day a story on metal roofs, one of those bullshit filler stories that even a mute dyslexic chimpanzee could report on, as far as mute dyslexic champies go. When the business owner recognized me and laughed about it being obviously a slow news day, I felt a wave of shame and I couldn't make eye contact with him. Staring out of his warehouse door, I noticed how blue the sky was. What was I doing? I was given a gorgeous summer day, and I spent it on a pathetic manufactured non-news story just to keep a job that was on life support. My work had no value anymore. Neither did my time. What was the point? On the way back, the highway overpass caught my eye. I would likely survive. I would likely I would likely survive if I drove off it. Some people had jumped from it, but usually they lived. I would know. I had to report on it. My gaze caught the large concrete column holding up the overpass, and I thought, if I turn this wheel hard right now, I don't have to do this anymore. As fast as the thought entered my mind, I was already past the columns. I had to pull over to collect myself and quiet my breathing, somewhat shocked at how very committed that impulse felt. I understand now why seemingly happy people sometimes turn that wheel, so to speak, and why we all lament not having seen the signs. It's not what happened that day. For me, it wasn't the metal roofs, it was what had been happening for months. Living with little hope makes living at all very painful. That afternoon, my world got shadowy. In the coming days, it would turn pitch black. The following week, I learned that our police department was building a case against my former orthodontist. He was a doctor who had cracked several of my teeth while pulling out my wisdom tooth, like he had been doing it while wrestling a bear. I had woken up from the surgery hyperventilating, crying, and panicking, but I didn't feel any pain. My orthodontist had been caught sexually assaulting his female patients while they were under anesthesia. His number of victims was more than 200, and now I was on that case file list. The dimly lit corners of my mind darkened completely. That night, while emptying out the dishwasher, I paused at the knives. This is what I thought. I could take the trip of a lifetime. I could just go, see whatever places I had ever dreamed of. To hell with work, to hell with money, to hell with all of it. It won't matter because when the trip ends, I just won't be alive. I put the knives away and used the dish towel to soak up more of those big, hot, heavy tears that had become the signature move of that year's big moments. Something had to give, or I wasn't going to be alive much longer. I had no prospects, no home, and I was not okay upstairs. Months prior, I had stared over the edge into the unknown, not knowing how far the fall would be. I was about to reach rock bottom, and the landing would finally crack me into pieces. So that's chapter 5. So I'll pause there for just a second because I'm sure that's not what anyone expects a book about van life to be like. But I included it because that's what happened. That's all of this is what actually precipitated me buying a cargo van and driving around the country. And I don't think we talk about these issues, frankly, enough. So they all made it in the book. So I don't see any comments. Um, so we'll just keep going. This next chapter is the chapter that names the book, and you will understand why. But anything, let me just pause for a second because I also need a breath. It feels very awkward to read that. Still very relatable. Yeah. Um, I reported on a lot of suicide. Well, that's not true. We're not really allowed to report on suicides in news, but I certainly went to some of them and saw some of them and was aware of most of them. And it's like like we don't talk about it. And especially it bothers me the number of our first responder suicides because they don't get all the hoopla for their funerals and they're not in the news and anything because it's considered a shameful way to die. And I'll say going through that part of my life, I have a very different perspective. It also changed my perspective when my dad committed suicide this past fall because Not that I was happy that he did it, obviously not. It was traumatic in its own right, but I also understood how he felt when he did it. Thank you, Cindy. Who Yeah, you never know what's going on in a person's head. And having gone through that, as dark as it was, I'll also say that in the 3 suicides that have affected my life this year, I've known everybody looks to the immediate event, like what happened the past 3 days. And I can testify that it's not what happened the past 3 days. It's like all this other stuff. And then there's just a day. And I vividly remember, and I still pass it because I still live here, that overpass. And if I had got a little bit more time, I would have just turned that wheel. I was just very committed that not that I wanted to do it, but I just thought I'll be free of all this stress. I just won't have to do this anymore. But I was driving so damn fast that I missed my opportunity. Thank goodness. Um, the audio version. So let me say what Kathy said. She said, I had no idea you were going through such a dark time. And that is the magic of the internet, right? So I have not, none of this, like, I didn't tell any of my girlfriends, my nothing. Nobody knew. And when I have shared parts of this book, like with some of my closest friends, and they're like, whoa, 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 like I had no idea you were. And I said, well, of course you wouldn't. Like, the internet is Photoshop for real life. And like, what am I going to do? Call you and just like roll that out in a conversation? So that's what I mean. Like, when this actually happens to people and they do succeed in it, and everyone's like, I had no idea. And of course you didn't, because people who are going through it are not going to raise their hand. And this is why I thought the book was so important to write, not because I want you to learn how to live in a cargo van, because I want you to learn how to save your own life. That is the purpose of the book. Period. All right. Yes, I did hide it very well. I was devastating. Give me 1 second. Okay. All right. Thank you so much. All right. So let's keep going. This is the chapter that names the book, because now you all know the purpose of the book. All right. Chapter 6. There are certain phone numbers that only call in the middle of the day when there's bad news to deliver. This was one of those numbers. My maternal grandmother, Granny, had died, the last of my grandparents. At 92 years old with a pacemaker, she maintained a daily morning bourbon habit. And so given that, perhaps we shouldn't be shocked. Still, Granny had evaded death better than El Chapo played hide and seek with the DEA. She still boogie boarded at the beach, she gambled, and she posed for photos with her middle finger salute. She seemed eternal as time itself. Maybe I was expecting more of a warm up, an enduring illness, a descent into fragility, a fight on the shuffleboard court that ended in a misdemeanor and extended ICU stay. Remember the second part of that recipe of success, having someone who loves you? I was formally and forever no one's granddaughter. There would never be another qualified applicant for the job of pretending that everything I did was wonderful. On the heels of my suicidal daydreaming, an undefeated streak of other bad news, weeks of illness, my brain crossed over a line from just barely handling it to no longer handling anything at all. I stopped listening after the word died, not needing to hear the specifics of how. The room blurred. All I could picture was my tiny, feisty grandmother lying up in a hospital bed, waiting for the inevitable, as she stared up at that sterile white hospital ceiling, knowing it was coming. Whatever pilot light was left flickering in my soul went out. I considered time. 2 weeks ago, I was 16, at least that's how it felt. I blinked and had blown through college and my 20s, only to land in my 30s in a vacant house without a future. If that much time had passed without my noticing, then Granny and I weren't far apart. A few more blinks, and I would also be staring up at a white, sterile hospital ceiling, just waiting. I debited nearly an entire year to my own mortal darkness created by existing but not actually living. I had no mortgage, no rent, no husband, no kids, no debt, and soon no job. I had been so fixated on everything I didn't have that I didn't see how valuable having nothing was. I hadn't lost everything. I had gained a kind of unlimited freedom that most people dreamed of. Freedom to fill in the blanks. I closed my eyes and pictured myself there in my last moments looking up at a hospital ceiling. And I asked myself, what decision would I have wanted myself to make right now? There was no great epiphany or crack of divine thunder, but I knew what the answer was not. It was not staying at a company that didn't want me. It was not taking a job, any job, just to earn enough to get by. No. From that point on, I would reverse engineer my story, starting with my final moments and working back to the one I had just inhaled into. That was the last day I carried a freshly printed resignation letter in my pocket, and the last day I applied for a job. So I just realized that maybe I deleted the part where I named the book. I have to go back and edit that. Shit. Anyway, the title of the book as it stands right now is Looking Up. Because that was it. That was given what was going on with me with my mental health, given when I was notified about what had happened in that chair with my orthodontist, and then she died, and it was like I just flatlined, and I had pictured her looking up at the hospital ceiling, and then I went through this whole of thinking about, like, it's gonna be my time to look up at a hospital ceiling and, like, what am I doing right now? And so anyway, I can't believe I took that out. See, this is what happened when an editor told me to cut it in half. I took out the important parts. That's what the book is called as of right now, Looking Up. And it's from that moment of thinking about her and thinking about at some point it's going to happen to all of us of where we're just staring up waiting for life to be over. And that's what I would maybe I do go into it a little bit later, but that I was going to commit that time, that I was just going to look up at life, and that's and you see through the book that there are all these times of doing just that, of looking up at the beautiful buildings and looking up at the stars, and like that, because that's what I wasn't doing. I was just working and then trying to find a job and just so focused in trying to piece together a life that had fallen apart that, like, I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't living. And so I will stop there. I like the title. I like the title. I found myself staring in a hospital last year. Yeah, so I mean, I think if we can dig on that, but that's do you understand now why I wasn't calling it anything about a van, because the story is about a van, but it's a lot more than that. And I think that's clear. And I don't want it to just speak to an audience of people who want to live in a cargo van, because I really want it to be to people who I think after the past 2 years will be very relatable, who have lost a lot, and how to make those decisions from there. And I'll tell you that I have to constantly remind myself that promise that I made of to reverse engineer the story when I'm trying to make a decision. Like right now, the housing market has just stalled, which is odd to me because now you can actually negotiate with sellers and you don't have to go way over and asking, but like nobody's doing anything because people are terrified because everything is like scary. And so I'm like, all right, well, so just like last time, the thing that was going so great is not. And so my immediate impulse was like, I got to find another job and I'm going to sell the townhouse and like, blah, blah, blah. And so I usually have to remind myself to go through that exercise of to reverse engineer it. So, okay, when you're looking up at a hospital ceiling, what decision will you want yourself to have made right now? Like, what is the story that I want to be telling to my super hot male nurse when I'm where she was? Because it goes fast. Put me down for a copy. Thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. All right, so we can do one more, and then I think we'll wrap up from there because it is lovely outside. I spent all Friday in court, and so I feel like I deserve a day to go play. And this is how I am going to tell you this one, and it doesn't matter. The only people who are listening now are going to hear all this because I'm taking this video down, and you all know why now. But when I was, I take two classes at night. I take a construction class, which is not me using heavy machinery. It's mostly me telling the men in the room what to do because that's what I'm good at. And then on Friday night, I take a constitution class, like where we read the Constitution and study it. And it's really interesting, mostly how far we've gotten away from the Constitution or how little people actually know about what the Constitution says. Anyway, one of the women in that class, she said, I just like, why NRV? Like, how did that happen? And so I went back and I added a little bit more to this chapter because that's the other thing I want people to know reading this book. Like, I wasn't on YouTube watching videos about van life. I didn't have an RV. I didn't want an RV. I never wanted to live in an RV. Like, I lived in a beautiful old historic home. That's what now I live in a new construction box. But it's not haunted and it doesn't have asbestos or lead paint. So there are some pluses. Anyway, that was not part of my, like, even slightly part of my thinking was anything to do with vans or RVs or travel. Like, when everything up into the chapters that I just read to you, like that, I was not fascinated by RVs. It's like no part of me that wanted any of that. And yet the chapter I just read to you, that was in July. And by October, November, I owned the Babe Bus. So that's the amount of time that your whole world can flip upside down and you end up living in a cargo van. Like, that is the space, because that chapter was in the summer, and shortly thereafter, I owned a cargo van. So buckle up. Okay, Madam President. Yeah, I tell you what, sometimes I think I should run because, like, anything would be better than some of the options we have. Okay, all right. So I'm going to go through this last chapter and we'll wrap it up there, and we'll just keep going. Pause here. The editor has 1 month. I think I might have said that. So we'll get it back in November. And then we get to do some of the fun stuff. But this is a year of work right here. All right. So we went through me debating ending it, and then why it's called Looking Up was that just final straw, about looking up at your hospital bed and thinking about what you want your life to look like. And so this part is how a cargo van or RV like even came to be. All right, chapter 7. Coastal North Carolina has an annual fall festival where everyone gets a new roof as a door prize. Hurricane season. I enjoyed severe weather coverage. Natural disasters were terribly easy to report on, and frankly, a mental break from murder and tax increases. The public isn't watching for facts, they're waiting for yard shrapnel to hit you in the face. That's what the people wanted, and I was happy to give it to them. Hurricane Florence started like any other tropical disturbance that roars up our behind from the Atlantic. A whisper of white noise until locking her path, growing into an absolute giant, and then slowing to a crawl until she gained enough weight to become a Category 4. A Category 4 hurricane is like being punched in the teeth once. At her pace, we'd be in an MMA fight with Hurricane Florence for days. Right before making landfall, Florence cooled her jets to a Category 1 and slowed down even more. Our meteorologists were practically in heat over the expected impact the public interpreted over her expected impact, but the public interpreted her downgrading as reason to stop caring. Most locals didn't evacuate for anything less than a Category 3. A 1 was just a bad rainstorm. We were mocked relentlessly on social media for hyping a whole lot of nothing. I was assigned to Southern Brunswick County, drove to the Shallotte Fire Department, and blew up a mattress on the captain's office floor. They had concrete walls, a generator, and an emotionally needy Dalmatian named Valor. Everything that I would need to ride out a storm. The guys politely taped cardboard over the office windows so that I would have some privacy and made a space in the fridge for items never before seen in a firehouse. Almond milk, veggie burgers, and all of my other weird rabbit food bullshit. That chivalry lasted for the first 12 hours. After that, it was a routine of soul-piercing insults at every meal and generalized mockery throughout the day, just as I had hoped. Outside, Florence beat down on us. At a certain wind speed, emergency vehicles stopped responding. If the crews get hurt, there's no one left in the fight. We pushed the limits on those rules hard. Even with high winds in the middle of the night, when the tones went off, we were headed out together. Back at the fire station, everyone arranged their soak gear to dry and circled around the TV. It was the closest thing to having a family I had experienced since I was a little kid. The Eye of Florence went nearly right over us, but the storm sat for 5 days. We were completely cut off from any rescue or aid. The gas stations ran out of fuel and tanks couldn't deliver more. The grocery stores went empty and people got into fistfights over what was left. The public's sheer lack of preparation over a nothing hurricane did more damage than the wind. The 911 emergency calls turned ignorant. People wanted the firefighters to deliver gas for their generators. They made complaints to emergency services about spoiling food. They deliberately drove into rushing water with kids in the back seat. The fire trucks and ambulances were dangerously low on gas, and anytime a pump line opened up, quickly cars plowed in behind it, even though they had nowhere to go. Meanwhile, we were spending the dwindling amount we had left to rescue them on their way back home. I became unglued. It was September. My contract had expired. Todd was my boss, were playing chicken. I waited to be fired and presumed he was waiting for me to quit. There was no way to get a live truck to me so I could send back footage. All I had was my cell phone, a depleted patience with the general public, and not an ounce of fear about being called into HR because I knew it was over. With nothing to lose, the Casey Roman Severe Weather Channel began broadcasting on Facebook. It was the first in your face, brutally honest, profanity hurling hurricane coverage America had ever witnessed, and it was all live. I stopped putting makeup on, my hair was plastered to my face, and my news lady voice left my body. By all standards of journalism, I was a train wreck with a hot mic, an unedited, unfiltered, unhinged paparazzi with no producer in her ear to cut off her audio. It was the first time I stopped adding WECT News back to you after signing off with my name. It was just Casey, and it was just what people wanted. My live reports quickly had thousands and thousands of viewers watching from all over the country. Several national news outlets requested access to my live feeds, not realizing I was a network reporter. My inbox was overrun with location requests and thank yous. I had never felt more authentic, and that was actually helping people. Moreover, I was doing it without a big studio, without the fancy cameras, and without a time slot. After Florence hobbled away from Wilmington, the main roads were washed out and I had no way to get back. So Snow White and the 10 ding-dongs kept doing the only thing we could do. We responded to calls and we hazed each other. On one particular call, I quipped that I'd build my next house on wheels so I could pull it away from storms. From the front seat of the fire truck, Lieutenant Mike yelled back, "I think they call that an RV, dumbass." And so from there, I go into how I actually found the Babe bus. And I'll paraphrase by saying that on the way out of the fire station, you had to pass a Dodge Ram dealership. And so every time we ran out to a call, we were driving past this dealership. And in the front of the dealership, they had a fleet of Ram 2500s. Now, mind, this is like during a hurricane, but we had to, every time we went out, we passed these. And I remember looking at those vans and thinking that looks just like one of those like small RVs. I didn't even know what it was called. I didn't know it was called a Class B RV, but that's what it looked like. And so from there, I ended up like scrolling through RV ads, and I realized that's exactly what it was. Like a Class B is just an RV put on that thing. And then I thought, well, I know how to build a house. I renovated my house, so I don't need you to build the RV. I'll build the RV. And so thank you, R&R. So it just kind of like became this thing that like I didn't even want. And so again, there was never a point in the years before. I was never watching YouTube videos about van life. I did not want an RV. And it took losing my job, going nuts, nearly killing myself, and then a hurricane, getting trapped in this fire station with these guys who now are very close friends of mine, where we couldn't leave, and driving past that dealership. And that was the first time I saw the Babe bus was was in a catastrophic hurricane. And then a couple weeks after that was when I drove right back down to that dealership, and I test drove it, and I bought it. I bought it with the money that I sold my house with. So so it's not the van life story that I hope you, cuz I got a lot of that feedback initially when I announced this project. Oh, it's already been done. Everybody was a fan, writes a book. And I said, I know they have, but I think my story is different. And I hope that it is, and that it has a lot more meaning than just about living in a van. It's kind of the roller coaster of life, and that also, look what can happen in a couple months span that you never thought would ever happen. So that's kind of where we are right now. And I'll tell you that Lieutenant Mike, I think he's still a lieutenant. I should probably check that. Last week, Bob, my soulmate, my Ram 2500 pickup truck, Bob got into an accident. And I should stop saying it like that because it sounds like I wasn't involved. I was absolutely involved. I drove Bob into a immobile, parked landscaping trailer like it owed me money. I mean, full send. I won't go in the whole story, but I just went right into it, and I punctured the bumper. So Bob, I bought him a new bra. That's what I've been calling it, Bob's new bra. And they're very expensive, these bumpers. But Bob has a new bra. It's in the garage, and Lieutenant Mike has been charged with attaching Bob's new bra. So we're all still very good friends. But being called a dumbass and being told what an RV was during a hurricane with a bunch of grumpy ass firefighters, that's how it happened. Yes, Bob was hurt. I was very upset about it. And I would love to tell you that because the landscapers were sitting in their truck when I hit it. And what should have happened is that when I made impact, I should have gotten out and I should have ran up to their car and made sure that everyone was okay. And I didn't. I got out of the truck and I ran to the front of Bob to make sure that Bob was okay, because that's what I care about. My poor baby. I was going to let it go and just let the dent be in there, but the sensor in the bumper is knocked out, so they don't work, and I can barely see over the steering wheel, Bob, so I can't be responsible for actually knowing how to park that without like sonar technology to tell me where the front of the truck is, because I have no idea. All right. Putting a bra on Bob could cause an identity crisis. Look, it's 2022. Bob can identify as anything that he wants. I didn't know what to call. I don't know why I couldn't just say bumper, but when I was ordering it, I kept saying I need a bra. And it was like a mechanic on the, he's like, you need a what? I'm like, like the thing that like holds up the, like, he's like, a bumper? I'm like, yes, Bob needs a bra. Okay. Any feedback about those 3 chapters before I go run and play outside? Shoot from the hip. Yeah, I do shoot from the hip. Anything about any questions, anything that you think was missing? Actually, what would be really helpful is, as I read that, is there anything you thought like, hey, I wish you had elaborated on that, or that wasn't that important, I would take that out? I will, yes. I will tell you that the editor, I told her, I said, listen, I've been reading chapters of this book on YouTube, and almost everyone has the same feedback, which is that I should just read it like an audio version. And she said that that wasn't a smart idea. And here's why. She said, I think the first thing that we should do is get your book through a developmental edit, get it the way it needs to be structurally. And then she said, I think that we should go reapproach some publishers and see if we can get it formally published. Because she said the way you did it the first way was not, like, you didn't do a good job. I probably didn't. I have no idea what I'm doing. So she said, I wouldn't do the audio version, because if you can get it published with a big publisher, they're going to want to have their paws all over that, and they're gonna want it with their audio companies and with their delivery system, and she said, "I think you really should just let's package it up, let's try one more time, and if it doesn't work, then you can try again." And so when I was telling her about that my approach to agents had failed miserably, she said, "Well, how many did you send it to?" And I said, "Oh God, hundreds. I sent it to hundreds of agents and nobody even like wrote me back and they all rejected me." And she said, "Hundreds? You sent it to hundreds of agents?" "Yes, yes, yes." I said, "Like, where's my fainting chair?" I sent to hundreds of agents. And she said, "You know that it's hundreds." And I said, "I have a list." So I got my list out of agents. Not this is not the list. And I said, "Yes, hundreds." And then I started counting and I said, "Well, 20." It felt like hundreds. It was actually 20. So we're gonna pause a little bit on the audiobook. Have you considered a subtitle to looking up? That's a good question. Let me write that down. I've not. Does it need a subtitle? I saw a couple. I was actually looking for a book to read, and I found there's plenty of books out there about living in a car, living in a van. Most of them are on the West Coast, where all the van lifers are sitting in a circle, staring at one another. And a lot of them are about just the what's the word? The not nuances, the novelty of living in a car, but I don't there is a lot of that in here. I just don't want that to be the hook because I think the hook is how to lose everything. Not everything, but like how to have all your dreams and goals fall apart and then the unexpected way that you can pick up the pieces. The last sentence of the book, let me see what the last sentence is, because I really struggled with how to tie it all up. The last sentence, stand by. The last two sentences are most of all, I had learned how to give tomorrow a starting chance and to give God a little elbow room to work. Because of that, I had learned to live. So I think I want the subtitle to be less about van and RV life and all that, and more about I want someone to be able to read this where it doesn't matter if you want to live in a van or not. And it doesn't matter if you want an RV or not, that you get from the story that it can be to the point where you don't want tomorrow to come. And then you can have, you can save your own life essentially. That's what I hope the message is. So we'll have to think about that. I can see a movie in your future. Okay, so one of the editors, not editors, agents, when you have to fill out this form and they're like, "Who would play you in a movie?" And I was like, "Oh my God, obviously me. We could not possibly cast for this. Nobody can wear these like I can." And I said, "Well, I don't think it's gonna be a I think it's gonna be a series. It has to be a series." And then I said, "No, it can't just be a series about this, like, it has to be an ongoing series because look at all the cool stories we found on the road." Be true to your beloved chapters. So Mike P wrote, "Looking up, I'm not about ponytails and side boobs." I'm not. I'm not. I'm the only fully clothed van lifer. I've seen some of the newer channels and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, like how does she have even less? Where do you buy that?" They're always in a bikini. It's the most amazing thing, always in a bikini. Going forward, I like that. It's more to RV life. To be continued. Yeah, that could be a well, we'll see. Well, y'all know how to get in touch with me. The see your personality. We could do live readings once the book comes out. Actually, that's a fantastic idea once it comes out because that's what book tours are supposed to be. They're supposed to be that you bought the damn thing and then you get a live reading, but you can also do them online. I don't see why not. I will say that so I started shopping for a Class B again. I mentioned that. And I spiritually committed to a Thor Tolero 20K. Yes. And the reason is that it has a really great desk office setup. But good Lord, are they expensive. Holy gracious. And I found one in New Jersey, the motherland, that now the whole thing is lithium ion. And I thought, well, I'm going to need this RV for the book tour that I have to do all the work for myself, right? So I have to get it. Now I can justify buying it. And all these RVs that are going full lithium, I get it. I get the theory, but when that battery needs to be replaced, or if you run like even like a kettle, you draw down so fast on those lithiums. I'm not quite sure about that. I think a regular standard generator with lithium backup maybe, but a couple of them are $200,000, and the get is that you don't need a generator, and I don't get that because you turn on the AC for 4 hours, you don't have any more battery, and then you gotta go plug in. I don't get it. When life gives you the middle finger, something like that. How am I going to sign your copy? We'll figure that part out. Okay. Well, I've thoroughly exhausted myself talking that long. I'm very happy that the usual Looney Tunes who get in here and try to bomb alive anything haven't made their way in. Um, so we'll stop there. So that's the latest. So right now we got a month out for it to come back with the edit. And then what I could use is if anyone knows a graphic designer, because somebody has to design the cover art. And then the next question is which one of my photos from the trip gets to be the cover art? And there's two that I think would do a good job. And I'm a little nervous making it the van. I'm nervous making that photo because I don't want this to only be niched into people who want to travel in RVs, because that's not the message of the book. So, we will just see from there. All right. So otherwise, the what are we doing next? I have a baby shower. I usually don't get invited to baby showers for lots of really great reasons. I just don't find it fun to build a tower out of diapers. It's not my ministry. But we're gonna try a different, because I don't have an RV anymore. We're gonna try truck camping. I found these mattresses. It's a blow up mattress, and it's like it fills in the seat, like the where your feet go, so that the whole back cab of the truck is an air mattress. It doesn't look comfortable at all, but because of the hurricane, a lot of the hotels here are full, and I'm not staying in some dingy side of the highway hotel. So I got to drive out to Atlanta. And so we're going to try some truck camping this weekend. So it'll be just like living in the car again. Can't wait. Can't wait. All right. Well, very good. Thank you so much, everybody. It sounds like there was nothing major with the book that had issues. If there is, my email is on a lot of the videos. You can find it. They're not too bad to sleep on. Yeah, it helps if you're short. Well, there are some blessings in being 5'2". All right. Well, I'm going to go play outside. I'm going to keep working on this book, and we'll try some truck camping next weekend. And then we can keep doing these, but I am going to delete them once they're finished. So if you were here, great. You saw that and heard that part of the book, and then that's it. Nobody gets it until it's published. So, all right. Bye, weirdos.